A man named Marcus arrives at Dubai International Airport with 3 suitcases and a letter from his accountant. The letter says one thing: leave before the new rules take effect. He has lived in Dubai for 11 years. He built a consultancy from nothing. He paid no income tax. He told everyone back home that he had figured out the game. And now he is at the terminal, not arriving, departing. That image is not an anomaly. It is a signal. 2 nations. 1 desert. One of them spent the last 3 decades building the most recognizable skyline on the planet. A promise so loud it could be seen from space. The other spent those same decades sitting on the 2nd largest oil reserves in the world, largely closed, largely static, moving at a pace that frustrated everyone watching from the outside. And then, sometime between 2019 and today, the trajectories crossed. One began to leak, the other began to pull. We are going to walk through 3 layers of this divergence. The symptom that is already visible, the structural shift that caused it, and the deeper question neither government wants you to ask out loud. If you have ever watched a city build itself into a legend and wondered how long a legend can actually last, this is the kind of analysis you keep coming back to. Stay with it. For 3 decades, Dubai's promise was the cleanest pitch in global finance. 0 income tax, freehold property for foreigners, an English-language legal system modelled on British common law, sitting inside a jurisdiction that answered to no external regulator. You could park your wealth, your business, your life, and the state would not ask too many questions. That was not a flaw in the design. That was the design. By 2022, the emirate had attracted an estimated 100,000 high-net-worth individuals, more than any other city on the planet in a single year. The numbers were staggering. The towers kept rising. The brochures kept circulating. But every promise has a price. And Dubai's price was always the price of proximity. When Russia's invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022, something happened in Dubai that the tourism numbers could not fully capture. Russian capital moved fast. Estimates suggest that tens of billions of dollars in Russian assets found their way into Dubai's property market within 18 months. The villas in Palm Jumeirah sold at premiums that defied the regional market. Cash purchases, no financing needed. And Dubai, critically, did not align with Western sanctions. It stayed neutral. It kept its doors open. Now ask yourself this. If you were a European or American entrepreneur watching your city's neutrality become a refuge for sanctioned wealth, what would you start to calculate about your own exposure? The Financial Action Task Force, the global money laundering watchdog, placed the United Arab Emirates on its grey list in March 2022. That single designation changed the compliance calculations of every major international bank operating in the region. Correspondent banking relationships tightened. Due diligence requirements deepened. The friction that Dubai had spent 30 years engineering out of its system came back, not from its own government, but from the global architecture of financial regulation that surrounds every jurisdiction, whether it chooses to participate or not. You cannot build a city on the promise of frictionless capital and then discover that friction is structural to the world your capital lives in. The grey listing was lifted in February 2024, but the signal had already been sent. And signals in finance do not unsend. Leave the grey listing behind and look at what it revealed underneath it. Dubai's wealth model rests on three pillars: tourism and hospitality, real estate, and re-export trade, which means goods flowing through Jebel Ali, the largest port in the Middle East, on their way to somewhere else. Each of these pillars is a transit business. Dubai does not produce what passes through it. It charges for the passage. That is not a criticism. It is a description of a model that worked brilliantly for as long as the geopolitical conditions around it remained stable. The moment those conditions shift, the toll road loses its traffic. The real estate market illustrates this more precisely than any other metric. In 2023, Dubai recorded some of the highest property transaction volumes in its history. Prices in certain districts rose by more than 40% over 2 years. On the surface, this looks like health. Look one layer deeper. A significant portion of those transactions were cash purchases by individuals relocating capital rather than building lives. When you buy a property to store value rather than to live in it, you are not a resident, you are a parking lot user. And parking lot users leave when a better parking lot opens or when the fees change. Today, vacancy rates in certain commercial districts of Dubai are climbing quietly, not dramatically, not in ways that make headlines. But the numbers are moving in a direction that the promotional material does not mention. How many of the people who arrived in 2022 are still there? And of those who stayed, how many stayed because they wanted to? And how many stayed because moving again was simply expensive? Drop that question. Hold it. Because what happens next changes its meaning entirely. 450 kilometers to the southwest, across the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, a different construction is underway. Not of towers, of systems. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 is not a branding exercise. It is a structural attempt to solve a problem that every petro-state eventually faces. What happens when the oil runs out? Or more precisely, what happens when the world stops wanting it? Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman announced the program in April 2016. At the time, the international reaction was polite skepticism. Saudi Arabia had tried reform before. The pace had always been glacial. The social restrictions were suffocating for the kind of talent a diversified economy requires. And the legal environment for foreign investment was opaque. Then the reforms began arriving faster than almost anyone predicted. Women gained the right to drive in 2018. Entertainment licenses were issued. Cinemas opened for the first time in 35 years. The General Investment Authority was restructured. Foreign ownership rules in sectors from retail to real estate were expanded, and the Public Investment Fund, the sovereign wealth fund that manages over $700 billion in assets, began deploying capital not just abroad, but inside Saudi borders, at a scale that had no precedent in the kingdom's history. Here is the question that cuts to the bone. If two cities in the same desert offer roughly similar tax conditions, and one of them is increasingly under global compliance scrutiny, while the other is building entirely new legal and financial infrastructure from scratch, where does the next wave of capital go? This is where the divergence becomes structural rather than cyclical. A woman named Priya, a fintech founder originally from Singapore, relocated her company's regional headquarters from Dubai's Dubai International Financial Center to Riyadh in 2023. She had been in Dubai for 6 years. She told a regional business publication, that the decision came down to two things: access to Saudi government contracts, which now require a regional headquarters inside the kingdom, and the sheer density of capital being deployed by the Public Investment Fund into sectors adjacent to her business. She did not leave because Dubai failed her. She left because Riyadh offered something Dubai structurally cannot: a domestic market of 36 million people with rising purchasing power, a government willing to be her largest client, and a reform trajectory that is still accelerating rather than plateauing. Dubai's domestic market is roughly 3 million citizens, in an emirate of about 3.5 million total nationals within a country of 10 million. Saudi Arabia has 36 million people and a median age of 29. The demographic math of a consumer economy is not subtle. Now we reach the layer beneath the symptom, the structural question that neither city wants to answer directly. Dubai built its identity on being the exception, the place where the rules of the region did not apply. Alcohol served in hotels, mixed gender spaces, Western legal frameworks. No questions about the origins of your capital. The exception was the product. But exceptions are only valuable when the surrounding environment is restrictive. When Saudi Arabia begins liberalizing, when entertainment, mixed social spaces, and foreign investment become available inside the kingdom itself, Dubai's exceptionalism does not disappear. It shrinks. Every Saudi who previously had to go to Dubai for a concert, a business meeting in an international standard hotel, or a glass of wine at a corporate dinner, is one fewer reason for the Dubai tourism and hospitality industry to exist in its current form. Between 2021 and 2023, Saudi Arabia's non-oil gross domestic product grew at rates that exceeded its own official projections. Tourism arrivals in the kingdom rose from around 30 million in 2019 to over 93 million in 2023, a figure that surpassed the tourism targets set for 2037 years early. Riyadh's hotel occupancy rates climbed past those of Dubai for certain periods. These are not projections. They are recorded figures from the Saudi Tourism Authority and independent hospitality data firms. Does this mean Dubai is collapsing? No, the infrastructure is too deep, the legal system too established, the expatriate network too entrenched for anything that dramatic. What it means is something more precise and more important. Dubai is facing the end of its monopoly on a specific product. And the company that loses a monopoly does not disappear overnight. It simply stops growing the way it did before. And for a city whose entire identity was built on perpetual ascent, that is a different kind of crisis. It is a crisis of narrative. Marcus, the man at the airport, is not a catastrophe. He is a data point. But data points accumulate. And when enough of them move in the same direction, they stop being anecdotes. They become a trend line. The question is not whether Dubai will survive. It will. The question is what it survives as. Two deserts. One old promise and one new one. The old promise said, "Come here because we have already built what the rest of this region has not." The new promise says, "Come here because what we are building has no ceiling yet." And capital, above all else, is drawn to ceilings it cannot yet see. Think about that for a moment. Think about every system you trust with your future. Does it run on what it built decades ago, or on what it is still building today? Because when a city stops being the exception and starts being one option among several, something fundamental shifts in the relationship between the city and the people who chose it. The unspoken contract breaks, not loudly, not with a collapse or a default or a crisis, quietly. One departure at a time. One relocated headquarters at a time. One new visa program in a neighboring capital at a time. That is not the story of a city failing. That is the story of a promise reaching its natural horizon. And the harder question, the one that outlasts this video, is not about Dubai or Riyadh at all. It is about every system built on being the best available option in a limited market. What happens to that system the day the market is no longer limited? Marcus boards his flight. The terminal is full of people arriving. Dubai International is still one of the busiest airports in the world. The towers are still lit, the cranes are still moving. And somewhere in Riyadh, a new financial district is rising from ground that a decade ago was empty desert. Same sun, different trajectories. And a question neither city can answer yet. Which of these two promises will still be standing in 2040? If you found this analysis useful, share it with someone who is trying to understand where capital and talent actually go when the rules of the game change. That is not a question the headlines ask very often. Subscribe and turn on the bell notification to be part of the community that reads the trajectory before the headlines catch up. This kind of work takes time, and it stays alive because people like you choose to keep it going. The content of this video is based on strategic analysis reports, estimated data, and hypothetical scenarios regarding the economic and geopolitical context. The information is offered for reference, independent analysis, and documentary storytelling purposes. It does not constitute financial, legal, or investment advice. The images and materials used serve to illustrate the arguments.